This is part 2 of the intermediate series on saber spinning. In part 1 we dealt with the reverse grip and how to get there and how that basically layers all of the moves that we dealt with in the basics. This time around I wanted to deal with another technique that's in the intermediate series, not because the technique itself is difficult to pull off, but because it gives you the ability to modify all of the things that are in the basics and add two moves that you already know. Okay, now what we're going to talk about today is the hand switch, and there are plenty of different ways to do this. I mean, there's a standard hand switch, a half hand switch. If you watch my tutorial series called Using the Force, there's also all different kinds of flips and rolls. So plenty of ways to do it, but for this tutorial, it doesn't matter how you switch your hands. It's just what you do with the hand switch as relates to the rest of the spins that I wanted to talk about. So I wanted to cover at least the, just for those of you unfamiliar with them, the basic hand switch. All right, so the basic hand switch has two parts depending on the direction of the blade. Okay, one part looks like this, sort of a bird maneuver here. We'll have the saber in one hand. We'll put the other hand under it, and we'll pass it off. So that's one half of this, or the simple hand switch. The other half, because once I'm in that upward wield, I can't do the same thing again. The other half involves having your hands like this. So once we switch here, we switch here. We count on the momentum of the blade to roll itself from one hand into the other. Alright, so that's a basic hand switch, and how that looks in the figure 8. There's that. And there's the other side of it right there. Alright, so if you know those two hand switches, how do we work them into the rest of the moves that we know? Well, in terms of the clock face, the clock face move, these spins over here, if you notice, are pretty easy because we're not having to work around our body too much. But when I move to this side of my body, I'm having to stretch my arm in order to get it over here so I'm not hitting myself in the shoulder. If my saber were in this hand, I wouldn't have that problem. So if we work a hand switch into the standard clock face, we can switch hands here and switch hands here at the 6 and the 12, so that our 9 o'clock beat and our 3 o'clock beat are much easier to do. So the way that looks, there's the 3, there's the 6, there's the 9, there's the 12. And it extends my reach on the clock face, and you'll notice it also keeps it all up in front of me. Okay, before on the clock face, half of the beats were going, or had the blade going behind my body. Here I've isolated the blade so that each beat is in front of my body. Okay, and so if I can do it in front of my body, I can also do a clock face where each beat is behind. Okay, we do a beat here, hand switch, and you'll notice that what I'm doing on my back is exactly what I was doing in the front. This. I'm just letting the blade switch from one hand to the other with that sort of bird maneuver. So behind my back, I'm still doing this. So beat there, beat at 6 o'clock, blade is straight up my back, I'm switching it to this hand, beat here, and then the other hand switch up here. And you notice that if I do this, the blade is isolated behind my back. It never comes in front of me. So that's another isolated clock face. Keeps it all up in front of me. Okay, before on the clock face, half of the beats were going, or had the blade going behind my body. Here I've isolated the blades so that each beat is in front of my body. Okay, and so if I can do it in front of my body, I can also do a clock face where each beat is behind. Okay, we do a beat here, hand switch, and you'll notice that what I'm doing on my back is exactly what I was doing in the front. This. I'm just letting the blade switch from one hand to the other with that sort of bird maneuver. So behind my back, I'm still doing this. So beat there, beat at 6 o'clock, blade is straight up my back, I'm switching it to this hand, beat here, and then the other hand switch up here. And you notice that if I do this, the blade is isolated behind my back. It never comes in front of me. Alright, so that's another isolated clock face. Alright, if I want to get this a little bit more fancy, we can also use the hand switch to, if I can use this, or if when I was doing the clock face there, I was using both halves of the hand switch, the bird and then the sort of diamond. If I want to just use one type of hand switch, well, if I want to sort of bring the blade in front of my body, all I do is add another beat. We'll be dealing more with adding beats later down the road. But here I do the same thing behind, and then instead of going up like this, instead of just going up above my head, I bring it back in front of me here, and do my hand switch there. So this is what Venturous was calling a blade barrier move in his tutorials, because it's bringing the blade all the way around the body. And basically what it is it's kind of a hybrid between two different clock faces. It's a clock face where I'm using another beat to bring it back in front of my body. You notice we've got 5 beats. If you count the number of times my saber blade drops down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, so instead of the 4-beat clock face, we added an extra beat over here so that I can turn the blade and bring it back in front of my body. Alright, so that's the clock face and the modified clock face with the hand switches. Let me briefly cover how it works with an obiani. Alright, so a standard obiani into a plum flower. Again, you notice that we're reaching the other side of the body over here, and I'm having to turn and stretch. And if I don't want to do that, or if I want more reach, I go from the obiani into the hand switch, upward beats, and then back into the obiani. So that's an obiani, and then I can transition back into those, and just sort of add them together and mix them around. It will also allow me to do an obiani on one side and an inverse obiani on the other. This was a combo that I introduced in the Doing Things Backwards tutorial. So I've got the obiani here, hand switch, inverted obiani, hand switch, obiani. And this is basically using this hand switch here in the middle of my body to add moves that I already know from the previous sections together and make something new out of it. Okay. And one last thing about hand switches. They also allow you to turn your body by using the hand switch to accomplish that. You'll notice that if I do a hand switch over there, I can do a hand switch over there, so they will allow me to pivot if I pivot with the hand switch and I use that extra beat on the switch to take a couple steps. Alright, so that's your basic hand switch and how it works into a lot of the other basic moves. Play around with that, see what you can add. It's a way of gluing moves to other moves and getting from one side of your body to the other. It requires you to be a little bit more versatile with your left hand, so practice the moves that you know with your right, with your left, so that after you get that hand switch down, you've got something to do over in the left hand. That's all we're going to cover today, so hopefully that's helped, and I'll see you on the forums.